Hello and most welcome to age 1357, and I'm going to read an article from the book mentioned in the previous lecture, Shaping Science with Rhetorics, edited by Leah Ceccarelli.
Written by her.
She's the author, sorry Leah. And here we have her name, Leah Ceccarelli or Ceccarelli.
Ceccarelli.
Shaping Science with Rhetorics. This is chapter 5, page 82, for you who would care to follow reading. A text rhetorically designed to negotiate different interests and beliefs. Those who write the history of molecular biology continue to dispute the value of Schrödinger's book and the meaning of the other laws passage. This chapter shows that when the text and its intertextual antecedents and responses are examined from a rhetorical perspective, a solution to both controversies begins to take shape. The dispute over the value of the book. Sorry, it's just a short break. A solution to the both controversies begins to take shape. The dispute over the value of the book is resolved by focusing on the content that allow the text to have such a strong motivational influence on its audience. A rhetorical approach acknowledges that Schrödinger's book contains technical errors, making it scientifically flawed from a modern perspective. It also recognizes that the book may have had some historical value in its scientific contribution. To the now forgotten debate over biological order. But instead of focusing exclusively on the book's contribution to the history of ideas, my rhetorical reading understands that the most important role of the book in the history of molecular biology was its influence on physicists and biologists. Who took up the study of the physical aspect of the living cell. This reading focuses on the inspirational content of the book. Since the scientists motivated by the book were instrumental to the development of molecular biology, the success of Schrödinger's motivational argument was, in its own way, just as important for science as any new discovery of fact or theory would have been. This rhetorical focus on inspirational content also supplements the readings of social historians who value the book's inspirational influence, but who imply that the impact of the book came solely from its timing and the prestige of its author. It is likely that there was more to Schrödinger's text than just good timing and a trusted name. After all, other respected authors made timely attempts at inspiring interdisciplinary integration, but failed. Something about the construction of Schrödinger's book allowed it to succeed, something that we can only appreciate when we engage a close reading of both Schrödinger's text and the intertextual documents that surround it. This perspective also resolves the debate over the correct reading of the other laws passage. Rather than develop a monologic reading that tries to reveal the truth content of the book, a rhetorical reading that privileges motivational effect focuses on the interaction between the text and its audience. By concentrating on that interaction, we come to understand how the success of the book can be at least partially attributed to the way in which it employed strategies of polysemy to negotiate the contrary interests of its targeted audiences. Since all three readings of the other lost passage were instrumental to the persuasive effect of the book, this rhetorical perspective suggests that all three should be recognized and appreciated. In this chapter, a close rhetorical study cultivates a new understanding of the book and its impact. This analysis argues that much of the success of what is life can be attributed to rhetorical techniques that simultaneously appeal to the contrary interests of different audiences. Just like Dobzhansky's successful move towards synthesis, Schrödinger's book contained techniques of persuasion that were instrumental to the development of interdisciplinary collaboration. Comparison with other attempts at inspiring interdisciplinary work. As earlier indicated, most commentators do not address the issue of how Schrödinger's book achieved its motivational effect. And when a few scientists and historians do begin to offer explanations, they end up providing reasons that are unsatisfying in their lack of specificity. For example, Crick argues that the book was extremely well written and made the subject seem exciting. And Stent says it worked by stirring up the passions of its audience. But neither of them explains precisely how it achieved these effects. To understand the influence of the text, we need to understand what it was about the writing that made it so exciting. Likewise, we need to expand on the broad political explanation offered by Evelyn Fox Keller. Who locates the power of Schrödinger's book in the social authority that the world-famous physicist contributed to a collaboration between physics and biology. Keller's explanation, though it certainly captures part of the reason for Schrödinger's success, does not tell the whole story. It does not adequately explain why other powerful scientists who urged collaboration at the time were unable to have the same dramatic effect on audiences. To fully understand the book's inspirational influence, we need to delve deeper than the name of its cover. Though So ethos was necessary. It was not sufficient to effect the transformation in disciplinary loyalties that allow the field of molecular biology to recruit so many workers at that point in history. A close reading of the text and intertext will allow us to more fully understand what made Schrödinger's plea for collaboration more persuasive than other similar pleas. H.J. Muller. To begin, we must take a closer look at other texts that made the same attempt that Schrödinger made, but did not achieve the same success. Keller first develops her argument about the influence of Schrödinger's ethos when she compares his text with a similar call for interdisciplinary collaboration written by H.J. Muller in 1936. According to Keller, the reason that Muller's call went unheeded was that Muller, being a mere biologist, lacked the authority either to command the attention of physicists themselves or to persuade other biologists to a program that most of them found totally alien. As a respected geneticist, Muller had the authority to command some attention from his scientific monthly audience. But it is true that he did not carry the same level of authority that Schrödinger did as a Nobel Prize winning physicist. Nevertheless, a close look at the arguments Müller employed suggests that another reason his call failed was that his text was not well designed to persuade physicists or other biologists to undertake collaborative work. Müller began his essay on a promising note. Suggesting that physicists will find the study of biology important not only because it can elucidate the most fundamental questions of biology, but because it might throw light on some of the fundamental questions of physics as well. This would seem to be the sort of appeal that would attract physicists to a new interdisciplinary study. However, it is the only place in the text where Müller considered the professional goals of the physicist in his audience. Rather than write an essay that reduced the barriers to collaboration by speaking to the physicist and the biologist about a productive new interdisciplinary study. Müller continually reinforced the boundaries between the two fields by addressing the physicist from the perspective of the biologist. Throughout the essay, Müller used the words us and we to indicate geneticists who are seeking new answers for biological questions. In contrast, physicists were spoken about in the third person and placed in the position of subordinates who would provide the information that biologists needed to answer those questions. For example, when talking about the gene's property of auto-attraction, Muller said, we would like physicists to search the possibilities of their science and tell us what kind of forces these could be and how produced, and to suggest further lines of approach in their study. When talking about the gene's property of autosynthesis, Muller said, we would like the physical chemists to work on this problem of autosynthesis for us. He made similar remarks about how the biologist would have more success in solving biological issues such as growth, reproduction, and heredity. If we had people of sufficient physical training to tackle such a job, praising the physicists who works on irradiation and mutation as the one who is today most actively and fruitfully helping the geneticist. Muller called on the altruistic spirit of other physicists who were willing to assist their brothers in the biological sciences. the geneticist himself is helpless to analyze these properties further. Here the physicist, as well as the chemist, must step in. Who will volunteer to do so? According to Elof Axel Karlsson, Müller valued the altruistic virtue that he called love of one's fellows. He believed that it was a superior genetic trait that the best people carried. Perhaps he thought that physicists were the type of people who could be motivated by an appeal to this inherent virtue. But it is clear from the lack of response that this appeal did not work. Physicists were not interested in working for biologists. In addition, biologists were not motivated to learn about physics after reading Müller's text. Because Müller had implied that they could rely on altruistic physicists to do the work for them. Though it is true that Müller's lack of authority as a mere biologist was part of the reason he did not draw the attention of his audience. Another part was that his essay was written in a way that maintained distance between the two disciplines and seemed to relegate the physicist to the role of a lab technician who would assist the biologist in solving genetic problems. Niels Bohr and Max Delbrück. The temptation to view the benefits of collaboration only from the perspective of one's own discipline overcame the geneticist H. J. Muller. The physicists Niels Bohr and Max Delbrück must have faced a similar temptation. By arguing that biology can be fully reduced to physical explanation, they could have tried to authorize the physicist's seizure of the biologist's territory. Unlike Muller, however, Bohr and Delbrück were extremely careful to ensure that their discipline would not be perceived as sitting in a position of privilege over its counterpart. In any interdisciplinary endeavor, rather than argue for reductionism, they argue that biology could not be completely reduced to physical explanation. This approach would seem to be a more promising start for interdisciplinary collaboration. It has the potential to negotiate the interests of the two disciplines rather than reducing one while privileging the other. But it did not spark the excitement that Schrödinger's did. I believe that Bohr and Delbrück ultimately failed for the same reasons that Muller failed. their arguments maintain the distance between the two disciplines limited the perceived power of physicists who decided to engage in interdisciplinary activity. Niels Bohr's appeal for collaboration came in his 1932 lecture, published in the journal Nature in 1933, titled Light and Life. In this address, he proposed that physics may influence our views as regards the position of living organisms within the general edifice of natural science. As far as I know, Max Delbruck was the only individual who said he was inspired by this lecture to turn from physics to the study of biology. Delbruck's own appeal for collaboration was made in a 1949 lecture titled A Physicist Looks at Biology. Here he argued that physicists who keep an open mind toward collaboration will create a new intellectual approach to biology. Delbruck's own appeal for collaboration was made in a 1949 lecture titled A Physicist Looks at Biology. Here he argued that physicists who keep an open mind toward collaboration will create a new intellectual approach to biology. For the most part, Delbruck's lecture and the published essay that came from it went unheeded. The most striking thing about both essays is that rather than adopt the reductionist approach of assuming that biology could be fully explained in terms of physical laws. They argued that some aspect of biological matter would ultimately remain hidden from the physicist methods. Said Bohr, in every experiment on living organisms, there must remain some uncertainty as regards the physical conditions to which they are subjected, and the idea suggests itself that the minimal freedom we must allow the organism will be just large enough to permit it. So to say, to hide its ultimate secrets from us. Indeed, the essential non-analyzability of atomic stability in mechanical terms presents a close analogy to the impossibility of a physical or chemical explanation of the peculiar functions characteristic of life. Delbruck shared Bohr's respect for the boundaries of the biological sciences. Arguing that it would be arrogant to believe that life could be wholly reduced to physical explanation. He warned that physicists should be prepared to find that life has placed an essential bar against its own reduction to the terms of molecular physics. By respecting the uniqueness of the biological sciences, Bohr and Delbruck honor the pride of biologists. assure their readers that physicists were not seeking to colonize territory that rightfully belonged to another group of scientists. But this recognition of boundary lines also work to maintain the distance between the two disciplines. At the same time that these authors promoted collaboration, they were implying that collaboration would break down at some level because the two disciplines were too different to share the same rules. In addition, although Bohr and Delbruck did not explicitly minimize the professional status of physicists as Müller did, they did place limits on the intellectual power of the physicist. Since physicists were the ones being asked to make the greatest change in professional goals, it is hardly an effective strategy to tell them that they would be unable to ever fully understand their subject matter. Even Delbruck admits that the irreducibility of biology is a depressing idea to physicists who may have thought that biology was an interesting field to enter. Schrödinger. What was really needed to inspire collaborative action was a negotiation of two fields that did not obviously privilege one discipline over the other, nor limit the power of scientists who choose to embark on the new path of inquiry. this negotiation of interests was the contribution that Schrödinger's book made to the development of molecular biology. At the outset, Schrödinger explained that his attention was to make clear the fundamental idea which hovers between biology and physics. To both the physicist and the biologist, namely that physics and chemistry can account for events that take place in living organisms. Rather than ask for the physicist to help the geneticist, and rather than argue that physics will never be able to fully account for biological events, Schrödinger addresses both groups with the claim that collaboration would yield scientific results. Also, as I argue later in this chapter, Schrödinger's ability to be ambiguous about the nature of those scientific results allowed readers with different philosophical and professional commitments to interpret his appeals differently, and thus unite in the praise of the text. A look at the responses of his readers indicates that Schrödinger's book was seen either as carefully negotiating the two fields or as supporting the particular disciplinary interest of a given reader. The book was not read by biologists as an attempt to wrongfully encroach on their territory, nor as an assurance that physicists would do their work for them. Neither was it read by physicists as a request that they volunteer their time to advance the careers of biologists, nor as a plea that they give up their own promising work for an ultimately fruitless study. Going to take a pause there. Page 87, at the end of the paragraph, even Delbruck admits that the irreducibility of biology is a depressing idea to physicists who may have thought that biology was an interesting field to enter. There is an incredible lure in that, and I would say it's almost irresistible. Maybe it can only be resisted by lack of intellectual powers. But still, as we've shown in previous lectures about Kant, Schlegel, Newton, it is the wrong way to go about. It's tempting, it seems to be a possibility, and you can never know it is not possible within knowledge. From that perspective, it simply doesn't work that way, even if you want it, and a lot of other people believes it. Knowledge is not mutable, not in that way. And once more we realize, were it not for quantum physics, all these new understanding would have been absolutely impossible. That would never ever happened. It could only be something that we learn from being in our reality. We would never ever go that way ourselves. And maybe that also shows that we are interactive in reality. And this is this boundary between us and the other. In this boundary, in this zone, everything happens. But if we make the zone, the border, just border, we miss that it is the restraint that makes all. Without the limit, there's nothing. Ignoring the limit and looking for the inside or the outside will not lead you. Knowledge has a structure. It is not transcendental, transparent, formless, as in the transcendental ideas of Kant, nor are they universal, floating about to be picked down by us. This might be the area of formless thoughts, the modern day university, where thinking has no form, no laws or rules or understanding that they follow. I don't mean classical laws, I mean laws that we can learn but not describe. This is the house of transcendental knowledge, which is like a mirror, only mirroring the outside. It reminds me about the clearest water you can ever imagine. A water that doesn't even have structure or feel to it. This is the perfect knowing, the unknowing knowing, borderless, not irregular like a fractal, not stepwise like quantum mechanics. Seamless, borderless, linear, a linearity that ignores the ruler that made the line or is the line. Happiness is borderless realm, somebody said, or beyond violence. All those things appeal to us, and it appealed to Delbrück, and as it appeals to most physicists, and even more so biologists today. Dawkins, for instance, found this borderless, transparent knowledge, higher reducibility, which means everything. It's another way of taking everything by taking in the smallest. It's on the surface a reversal of the whole universe, as in the cosmological fallacy of Lee Smolin, Roberto Ungar. That in its reverse is the atomization of biology to DNA. It is Kantian/Newtonian, transparent, not taking in the observer, not having edginess, borders, irregularities. It's a total knowledge that could be emphasized in one blank, transparent, borderless thought. I think this is helpful because I would say that idea, that conception is still very tempting. I don't think it's a coincidence that in Hollywood movies and books about near-death experience and novels, death or the beyond is often depicted in a borderless light. In the movie Poltergeist, they warn the little girl, the daughter in the house, to not go into the light. And the light seemed to be cleaner, but also homogeneous, borderless, propertyless. And possibly in the movie, if it were to go in the direction of the light, Carrie, I think the little girl's name was, would over there find the featureless God of Xenophanes, without animal properties or human face, without personality, without time, without space. And people think, oh my, Xenophanes was so modern, with his transparent, non-formalizable, non-property-like God. It's a tempting thing for us Westerners. And I think this temptation actually stems from an original lack somewhere, a trauma. There is no parallel here. But think of a child that gets some horrendous reason at an early age loses his or her parents. Those children could become overly dependent on others and other things. The trauma of the Greek made them looking for something, but looking in the wrong direction. They lost it, and the parents of the Greek never departed. They are not really gone or dead. But the despair makes the mind make jumps, makes it hysterical, makes it hallucinate a piece of stone, materialism, to be a warming mother. Our need makes us invent things also. That is not the whole reason though, because what Dobzhansky described is also in some sort on the paper an actuality to a certain extent. But the trick is, and I think Schrödinger learned that trick, is to see it's all around us, and then you can be with your true father and mother. I say thank you very much and have a very pleasant afternoon. The grass is still green here in western Sweden. Odd, but nice.